There's something strangely fascinating about difficult places. The higher you climb, the more beautiful the landscape becomes, but also the more impossible it feels to build there. And standing here on the highest peaks of the island, I realised this project was going to test every part of how I design. Because almost immediately, one major problem appeared. There was no practical way to connect the mountains at all, no pathways, no structures, nothing. And slowly, an idea started forming. So sit back, grab a drink. This is Windrose. Before building anything, I spent a while just exploring the peaks themselves, trying to understand how the terrain naturally wanted this project to evolve. And honestly, the landscape was already starting to answer some of the questions for me.
No, God!
The narrow opening in the cliffs, the lower rock formations hidden beneath the main peak. Oh, and please ignore the highly questionable sleeping arrangements balanced precariously on that mountain peak over there. We all start somewhere. But honestly, I am enjoying this series so much already. Each project more ambitious than the last, and this world slowly evolving over time. And honestly, seeing all your comments on the recent videos has been incredibly nice to read. I know this style of content is a little different, slower paced, more focused on the atmosphere and architecture. But seeing so many people connecting with it has been honestly really motivating. So if you've been enjoying the journey so far, I would love for you to stick around and join us. Because something tells me these projects are only going to get more ambitious from here. Now, back to the problem. The more I explored the mountains, the more obvious the solution started becoming. If this retreat was ever going to work, it needed a helipad. Yes, a helipad in a pirate game. I already got rinsed for building a modern villa in the last episode, so let's see how the comments handle this one. But the only location that truly made sense for it was an entirely separate mountain peak. And suddenly, this stopped becoming a mansion build and became a question. How do you connect two mountain peaks without destroying the landscape that made them beautiful in the first place? So, before anything, I needed to get that bridge in place, because realistically, if this connection between the peaks didn't work, the entire project falls apart. The bridge wasn't just going to connect the mountains physically, it was going to define the alignment for the entire build itself. And honestly, I had absolutely no idea if it was actually going to work. But somehow, it did. And immediately the scale of the project started changing, because once the mountains were connected, suddenly the possibilities started expanding with them. So I started pushing foundations outwards to explore where the architecture naturally wanted to go. And almost immediately, the small opening to the left of the bridge caught my attention. With the open views across the islands, it felt like the perfect location for a small guest house. Far enough away from the main structure to feel private, which I'm sure future guests would appreciate. Straight off the helicopter, across the bridge and directly into the guest house, keeping the in-laws safely separated from the main structure. Bliss. As we expand towards the main villa, I noticed this lower rock platform sitting beneath the main structure, and immediately it felt like the build needed to step down into it naturally. A lower deck area, fire pit, seating, maybe a barbecue area later on. Small elevation changes like this add so much interest to a build, because instead of forcing the terrain to submit to the architecture, you start allowing the landscape itself to shape the experience. One teeny problem though, there simply wasn't enough clearance above the lower section. So the entire balcony connecting the Helipad bridge to the main house had to be raised slightly. And honestly, that tiny half foundation elevation change ended up improving the architecture massively. The silhouette became more layered, the transitions felt cleaner, and suddenly the structure started feeling far more believable. As we continued further around the mountain, I found this opening in the cliffs overlooking the water below, and the moment I saw it, I knew I wanted to protect that view. So rather than building directly into the opening, the structure slowly started wrapping around it instead. And naturally, this immediately started feeling like the perfect location for the bedroom. Large windows, private balconies, open views across the ocean. Spaces designed less around efficiency and more around experience. As the foundations expanded further into what I thought was going to become the main living area, the views just kept getting better. Ocean on one side, mountain peak on the other, and right in the middle of it all, this huge tree. And honestly, I really didn't want to lose it. So rather than removing it, the house actually sacrifices part of the balcony space to keep the tree integrated into the structure itself. And I think decisions like that make the architecture feel far more believable. Not when a structure completely dominates the landscape, but when it learns to live alongside it. The next challenge? Verticality. Which, to be fair, when you decide to build directly into the side of a mountain, was probably inevitable. Because while the main living area was finally starting to take shape, the terrain immediately started pulling the architecture further down the cliff. The bedroom sections naturally wanted to step lower into the mountain itself, and beneath that, another platform revealed itself again, which meant the biggest challenge suddenly became figuring out how all of these different elevations would actually connect together. Because I didn't just want random staircases thrown between the rooms, I wanted the movement through the build to feel intentional. Viewed frames as you descend through the architecture, sight lines opening up naturally between levels, moments where you come down a staircase and immediately see straight out across the ocean through a window. Almost like the mountain itself was slowly revealing the landscape to you as you move through the space. And one of my favourite things about building this way is that the terrain constantly forces the architecture to evolve. Every elevation change creates another problem to solve, but also another opportunity to make the build feel more believable. Carrying on with the build, I wanted to start mapping out the living area properly, and initially I tried following the width of the tree directly, but almost immediately the space started feeling far too narrow. So instead, the structure slowly evolved into more of an L-shaped layout. Not only did it give the room far more space to breathe, it also prevented the balcony from encroaching too heavily on the views from the bedroom section further down below. At this point, the project started becoming less about foundations and more about figuring out how these spaces would actually function together. Originally, I had planned to squeeze another 2 bedrooms into this next section of the build, but the more I looked at the layouts, the more unrealistic it started feeling, because the rear balcony would have been completely overlooked by the main living area. So instead, the entire section slowly transformed into a little corridor connecting the bedrooms. And honestly, it made far more sense to place the main bathroom here instead, seeing as I forget them in every build I do. While I don't think there's realistically enough space to squeeze another ensuite into the master bedroom itself, I think the close proximity to the bathroom and the additional balcony space overlooking the ocean feels like a pretty fair trade-off. So up until this point, I've been using the stone tiles pretty much everywhere, which worked well for the outdoor terraces and pathways. But once the interiors started taking shape, the spaces started to feel a little too cold and unfinished. So slowly, I started replacing the tile flooring with the warmer wooden floors throughout the interior sections. Although about halfway through changing the floors, I immediately got distracted building one of the chimneys and started detailing instead. Because apparently, I'm physically incapable of finishing one task before starting another. Probably why I've got a non-existent upload schedule. But anyway, eventually I forced myself back onto the flooring. And honestly, that one material change immediately made the architecture feel far more believable. The stone still feels connected to the mountain itself, while the warmer wood tones make the living spaces feel far more human. At this point, you probably expect me to finally commit to that living room layout. You'd be wrong, because instead, I procrastinated by building stairs outside. I still had to adjust it slightly so they didn't go directly into the floor and become a trip hazard. Health and safety. The elegant woodwork, the sloping concrete, the warm lighting. Meanwhile, the Helipad stairs are sitting there wondering if I'm ever coming back. Just like me waiting for my dad at Christmas. Getting the stairs in now. Adding some of the concrete structural supports. Just starting to give the architecture a little bit more weight and detail. And I also started placing some temporary torches around the build so you could actually see what I was doing half the time. Although the lighting does look slightly weird sometimes. But honestly, that's probably just my computer at this point. It's definitely due an upgrade. Speaking of upgrades, if you'd like to support me on the Patreon, next I found something else to procrastinate with, which was finally finishing this two-tiered balcony section. But almost immediately, the interior space started feeling a little awkward and cramped. So naturally, the entire shape had to be rearranged to open up the space a little more. Oh no. And by the time I'd finally figured out what to do and start building, it was night time again. Which means I somehow spent an entire in-game day redesigning one awkward little corner. I swear, I'll get round to building that living room tomorrow. And finally, after spending what felt like an entire architectural lifetime procrastinating, it was finally time to build the living area. Now admittedly, the first attempt at the decking structure looked absolutely horrible. The walls were far too bulky, the proportions felt awkward, and the whole thing just felt unnecessarily heavy. So, attempt number 2 introduced the recess support instead. And honestly, it was a huge improvement, but something still wasn't saying right. The structure still felt a bit too disconnected from the roof itself. So naturally, the only logical solution was manually free placing an entire section of flooring directly onto the roof, which somehow actually worked. No clipping, no structural disasters. Third time lucky. For the first time during this build, the final silhouette of the project finally started coming together. Which of course meant it was time for some beam action, baby. Roof trims, support beams, detail work. We'll just skip the remaining emotional breakdown. Next came the windows, which quickly became a problem because this game doesn't exactly offer massive modern glass panels, almost like it's a pirate survival game or something. So instead, I started improvising, using the beams and the columns to create the illusion of a large framed window. I also added horizontal beams through the centre sections to help sell the illusion even further. Although realistically, if this game gave me giant modern glass panes, they would be spammed everywhere. But once the windows finally started going in, the entire build suddenly started feeling like an actual home, which meant it was finally time to move on to the interiors. And honestly, this is usually where the build either comes alive or completely falls apart. After finally deciding what each room was actually going to become, I started with the kitchen. And you know me by now, absolutely none of the furniture was allowed to remain normal. Custom cooker, the extractor fan integrated directly into the architecture. Whilst I was working on the kitchen, I realised the space was just starting to get a little too crowded, and originally there were 2 separate balcony doorways leading outside, which honestly made absolutely no sense. So instead, I decided to keep the smaller, more intimate balcony and remove the second one entirely. Mainly because it completely overshadowed the bedroom balcony beneath it. And if I'm honest, it didn't line up properly anyway, and it's been bothering me for ages. And after a bit of tidying up, and for some reason struggling to place the simplest blocks, the final shape immediately started feeling much cleaner. Although the lighting still looked slightly off. So after moving the lighting slightly further away from the walls, everything finally started settling into place. And honestly, the final version looked far better because of it. From there, the living room started becoming the real centerpiece of the entire project. Large open views across the island, custom seating area, and after the previous episodes, apparently I'm now physically incapable of building a normal fireplace anymore. The master bedroom was designed to feel a bit more quieter, more private, more relaxed. Almost tucked away beneath the rest of the architecture itself, with the balcony views becoming the real focal point of the entire room. Even the bathroom slowly became part of the architecture itself. Using warmer materials and softer lighting to stop the space feeling too cold against the surrounding stone. Outside, the lower decking area slowly evolved into more of a social space, custom seating, fire pit area, and eventually a built-in barbecue section overlooking the ocean below. And yes, somehow another vivarium idea started creeping into the project as well, because apparently once you accidentally build one reptile enclosure into a mansion, that just becomes part of your architectural identity now. And slowly, after days of redesigning structures, reworking layouts, and procrastinating literally every major decision possible, the mountain retreat finally started feeling real. But there's just one thing left to do. We arrived back at where the entire project originally started, the Helipad location. So, with the main structure finally complete, it was time to properly finish the bridge connection and landing platform itself. And seeing the entire project finally connected together for the first time, made the whole thing feel far more believable than I ever expected. It's strange really, because it feels like just yesterday we were sleeping inside a highly questionable wooden hut balanced on a mountain peak clearly too small for it. And now somehow, that tiny shelter has evolved into this. And yes, before anyone asks, I never actually built the guest bedroom in the end. So unfortunately, I guess the in-laws can't visit after all. Shame. But honestly, I think that's what I'm enjoying most about this series so far. Not just building bigger projects, but slowly watching this world, and myself, evolve over time. Each build starting to feel connected to the world around it, like part of a real place. All the support on these recent videos has kinda been surreal. The comments, the encouragement, people connecting with the slower pacing and the architecture side of things. It honestly means a lot. I wasn't really sure if this style of content would really resonate with people, but seeing so many of you enjoying these worlds alongside me has made me incredibly excited for where this channel could go in the future. And somehow, we're already getting close to 8,000 subscribers. But honestly, the real goal this year is 20,000. And I would love for you to join me for the journey, because I really feel like we're building something special here. I always wanted to be an architect growing up. And maybe this isn't exactly the traditional route. But honestly, building worlds like this together feels pretty close. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I really can't wait to see you in the next one. Ginge.